Good morning and welcome to the Daily Cyber Briefing for Friday, the 24th of October. I'm Stephen Ridgway and I'm here with our Head of Engineering, Ross Eastman.
Hello.
Okay, so I've only got one article which I'd like to bring to people's attention today, and then it'll be over to Ross to talk to us about all things that are interesting that we've seen flying around the internet and hitting our honeypots, and trends and stuff and general interest things in a minute. So, right, the article. So I came across this article in HelpNet Security, quite a long article, quite a good article, which I would definitely recommend that any listeners or viewers to the briefing have a little look at. But it is a summary of Microsoft's 2025 report, and it is in talking about the rules of engagement in cyber defense and the things that are that have been seen during this year, the changes in the approach of adversarial groups. None of it is revolutionary, but it is always good to be aware of what is actually going on at any particular time. The key areas that they call out, identity checks are at the center of attacks. So 97% of identity-based attacks still rely on password spraying or brute force techniques. So whilst MFA blocks most of these things, they quite rightly point out most organizations have got gaps, especially around service accounts and what they define as non-human identities. So that one is something to think about. Ransomware, it remains a significant issue, but has, as they describe here, found new leverage in hybrid systems. Whereas ransomware, I think, was generally more of a problem in the past, where it was contained within a particular part of an environment. So if you're a large on-prem flat network, well, you're in trouble. But if things are nicely segmented and so on and so forth, it was significantly harder for a ransomware outbreak to compromise the entire environment, because the entry and exit points in and out of any particular environment where the ransomware found it were controlled. There are now adversarial techniques which will look to exploit paths between environments and paths between, say, on-prem and cloud, or paths between clouds, and so on and so forth. So a lot of this stuff is down to misconfigurations. So not being aware of what connectivity or what communications are possible between different parts of your environments, or not being aware that you have actually created a path from A to Z via, B, C, D, and all sorts of other environments. And if you join it all together, you can end up anywhere you want. Although in the past, where I've worked in highly secure environments where it was remarkably difficult to even get your job done, the people that knew all of the ways round the controls tended to be the tech team, who, if they'd put as much effort into doing their jobs as they'd put into being innovative, into finding ways of subverting the stuff that the security team had put in place, the company would have been amazing. But there we go.
This is always the way. I mean, integration, as they say, is hell, and that tends to be, as we're talking about now, where things fall through the gaps. I mean, inter-cloud connectivity, whilst it's simpler than it's ever been, the possibilities for misconfiguration are wide and disastrous.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you inherited and you've seen my rather pitiful attempts at securing stuff in the cloud. It's very complicated, and I was very relieved when somebody who actually knew their way around, AWS and the other places, actually began to have a look at it.
I mean, and then you consider that multi-cloud. You've got three big players, and they've all got different IAM systems and different ways of doing things, and it's not beyond the realms of possibility that you'll have a team who's never used a cloud that business has decided is important for you to use now. And you've got a kind of perfect melting pot of potential disaster.
Yes. And I think one of the things that I find frustrating about the way that cloud environments are administrated is that all of the concepts that come out of 30, 40, 50 years of IT and IT security. All of those concepts are there somewhere.
Yes,
They're not. They're never where you would expect them to be. So yes, you can go to the tab labeled security, and there'll be a bunch of stuff. But then you also need to go to some of your user bits in order to do. You need to go to the users and groups areas to look at certain sorts of permissions and set certain. So you've got all these rights and privileges. I thought AD was complicated when they released AD, but trying to understand one cloud environment's security posture, let alone many cloud environments.
Absolutely. And then you get changes made under the guise of improvements, and you can use it even more.
Do you remember when Microsoft used to change your security settings whenever you had a patch?
So I can say no, because I've never been a Microsoft admin.
Oh, good for you. I sadly have had to work with it before I became a Linux and Mac person.
I'm quite proud of the fact that the last time I had a Microsoft operating system was Service Pack 2 for 2000.
Oh, I gave up. When was it? I think Windows 95 to XP.
Oh yeah,
was the point at which I stopped using it myself, because that upgrade went so spectacularly badly that learning Red Hat was actually easier than trying to unpick the mess I'd got into with XP. Rich. We'll have to get Rich on these if we're going to be talking war stories.
Absolutely. His war stories about Microsoft things. He was talking to me just the other day about a system that I'd never heard of called NSP, or NPS. And he was saying about, when you first bring the controller online, it kills your access to AD across your entire domain.
Ouch.
Again, under the guise of Microsoft trying to be helpful. But yeah, I mean, I'm not here to OS bash everyone.
Oh no. I mean, I think there was a time when I did worry about the quality. There's certainly from a cyber perspective, security perspective, the quality of the stuff that came out of Microsoft.
Yes,
that's absolutely hasn't been the case for 20 years. I think they take it very seriously indeed. But I think that they've got an incredibly hard job.
Yes, they do. I think because it's such an iterative thing, their entire life cycle of their operating systems. I think it was XP. People used to complain to me all the time about how much had changed under the hood and how much continued to change under the hood over the life of the operating system.
Yeah.
And lots of it was driven by security. But that just meant that people who wanted to actually have control over their environments a bit more closely, or people who, I don't know, did registry edits, found themselves in quite a lot of bother relatively frequently, because Microsoft sort of went, well, nobody should care about this. No one should care about the changes we're making because nobody should be touching this.
No, exactly. Exactly. They make an assumption about the starting point and then change things.
Yes.
Well, if you've altered stuff, do you know? I did once. There was a guy, Malik Denora. If you're out there still, I have not forgotten what you did to AD at one of the places where we both worked together years ago. But I think he had an unofficial strategy to see how much of AD could be changed, how many things in a registry could be changed, how many AD settings could be altered before Windows stopped working.
Yes.
Yeah. For years after he left the organization, we would implement things that would fail because somewhere in some dark corner of AD, Malik's fingerprints were over some random change. So he was a very, very clever guy. Clever guy.
That's the danger. I think, but then Linux has got the opposite problem. The backwards support for Linux stuff, that their reticence to introduce breaking changes means that the amount of stuff that they have to try and keep secured and also support back 20 years is huge. So I think
there's no easy solution.
There's no easy solution. Everyone's got security problems. It just depends on what your attitude's been to backwards breaking changes. Microsoft, I think, don't mind so much about backwards breaking changes in the name of better security.
I think they don't now. Although there's going to be an interesting. I think there will be a certain amount of pressure building up around the Windows 10 end of life stuff, because there's an awful lot of Windows 10 out there, and the hardware requirements mean it actually costs you potentially quite a lot of money to
Yeah.
move.
Yeah, I mean, in the sort of the tech influencer space, I guess, the tech media space, there's been an awful lot more than I've seen ever before of people saying, actually, that's probably the end of the road for me and Microsoft. I'm going to be going and doing something else, whether that's Mac or Linux or whatever.
Yeah.
Purely because of the hardware requirement thing, which isn't new. It happened 7 to 10 as well. I think they made some hardware requirements fairly mandatory at that point.
Excuse me.
And some of them, again, were in the basis of security. I think you couldn't, by default, install 10 if you didn't have TPM, for example.
Yeah.
Which didn't exclude a lot of hardware that had been introduced in the interim between 7 and 10, but a lot of people running older machines. And of course, you've got to think about developing countries and stuff like that, where
absolutely,
there's more of an attitude of making sure that hardware keeps going as long as possible and replacing bits of hardware when possible. Rather than entire systems. And the same things happened again 10 to 11. I mean, 11's got other problems. The people who deeply care about these things are very upset about stuff like advertising in OS and that kind of stuff. Things that we hashed out in Ubuntu about 10 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, well. There we go.
There you go.
There we go. Anyway, look, Ross, tell us, what have you seen over the week? What's been going on in the world of nastiness?
Everything changes and nothing changes at all, as tends to be the story pretty much every time we talk about this. The key players don't really change, but the sort of fringes and the more interesting stuff around the edges do seem to change. Geolocation-wise, I have a slightly different list every week, which has surprised me. I kind of expected it to always look roughly similar, but for example, this week, Germany's in at nearly 20% of our traffic as an IP source.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which, hadn't even appeared in the top 10 for the 2 weeks previous. Russia and China have pushed up the list, which is... I always expected Russia and China to be decently in that mix, and they never were up until this week. So, the US is still top of the list by a considerable margin.
Is this because, or is it at least possibly because there is literally more IT in the States than in lots of other places? There are more IP addresses that are over there.
Yeah, and there's more hosted solutions as well, right? So people who are from other countries buying hosted solutions in the States.
Yes.
In the States than there are anywhere else.
If you do nothing, your cloud environment defaults to somewhere in the States. Yeah.
Absolutely, AWS defaults to North Virginia. So there is a decent argument to be made for that, and also I think I covered it in the first week. If you were going to attack a web service from an apparent geolocation, I would choose the United States, because there are far fewer firewalls out there blocking IPs from the United States en masse compared to some of the countries where maybe some of these attacks actually originate. You might very well have a complete block on IPs from certain countries, depending on where you do business as a web service. So, but the US doesn't tend to be among them.
No,
it's quite a good bet, really.
Given the fact that your average high school kid knows how to appear to come from anywhere in the world in order to avoid getting caught by their school's security controls, VPNs. My kids were trying to teach me about VPNs at one point when they were quite young. It was really surprising. We can get around all that stuff by using a VPN.
No way. And other than that, we've now got some South American countries present in the top 10 that we didn't before.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which, again, that's not a particular surprise, but it does surprise me that it's not been there up until now in some ways.
No, I mean, my experience of South American, Latin American IT and security is that people that know Latin America understand some of the anomalies and some of the things that are very unique about Latin America. But the difference between rich and poor is it's so much bigger than you would see in the West. But it's not quite like bits of Africa where you can get poor as in there is no technology at all.
No.
So it's floating around. But as a consequence of the fact that nobody, and you're either rich and you can do it all very well indeed, and a lot of big businesses runs extremely good IT out of Latin America. But as a general population, there are a lot of people that really struggle with the concept of paying a lot of money for an operating system. So the amount of pirated software, and in my experience, having had long-term contacts out there, the amount of pirated software is absolutely astronomical, and the cyber problems there are 10, 15, 20 years behind where we would think they would be.
Absolutely. And I think, to sort of hark back slightly to what we were talking about a bit earlier, the cost of hardware in Latin America is considerably higher than it is in other places as well. I mean, dollar for dollar, significantly higher. So you are going to see a lot of old hardware which only supports older and unpatched operating systems, etc. And so in terms of things like botnets, it's probably a very rife sort of hunting ground for finding hardware running old software that can be used to leverage, another node for a botnet.
Yes, I mean, I suppose the only silver lining to that particular cloud is that the hardware tends to run so slowly that they're not exactly the best machines. If you're trying to build a high performance botnet, you wouldn't choose those ones.
No, absolutely not. Normal things with geolocation apply massive pinch of salt. But it's interesting that the map changes. If the map never changed, I wouldn't bother talking about it, but the map does change week on week. So I guess presumably that's people trying to move off of known bad IPs for their attacks, and just hopping around the world to wherever they can find an IP space to rent that might not be covered by a previous known bad IP block.
Or do you think it's also potentially to do with because I mean this stuff we're going to see it in bulk because probably it's connected with a botnet somewhere. And given the fact that dealing with botnets is very much a whack-a-mole, if from the ISP perspective, they've been shutting down traffic from known botnets that happen to be in a particular part of the world, the botnets will just pop up again from somewhere else. So it may well be that they'd stamped on the stuff from Latin America a few weeks or months ago. They've had their focus on whatever it might be, and so in the meantime this other stuff has popped back up again.
Hail Hydra.
Absolutely.
So that's geolocation. Sniff ports, we've got VNC still at the top by far and away. Still the most hammered port is 5900. We've got a new entry from Telnet, so port 23. People are trying some very old hat techniques. It's one of those things you're like, surely no one's exposing Telnet, but they must be. Otherwise, people wouldn't be poking at port 23. That's in second place.
We're literally back to the Ark with the old-fashioned Telnet exploits.
Yeah, it's bizarre. But you do see these waves, and it's difficult to pin down any news about it. You occasionally find some stuff where people have been talking on forums about a particular exploit that they think might be worth trying again. So you do see these sort of trends and things that they're trying. SSH is still in the top 5, which you totally expect. And we're back to the Ark with port 25. Who does SMTP without TLS anymore? Apparently a lot of people. You wouldn't expect it really, but then again, maybe you would. That's been the top 5.
I suppose the cost of attempting something where your expected failure rate is very high, the cost is fairly low.
Yes, but
the potential so that 1 in a million that you manage to compromise could potentially lead to all sorts of nice things going on from an attacker's perspective.
Especially when you're leveraging botnets, so the actual cost of the attack is nothing. Up to you anyway, as an individual or a threat group. Why not? I guess keep hammering away at the old stuff, and certainly the CVE signatures that we're seeing for a lot of these attacks, as we talked about previously, lots of them are targeting 20, 25-year-old CVEs. Again, I guess because the potential for a golden goose is particularly high in the spaces where things are still being done in very old-fashioned ways.
Yeah.
Um,
And also, I
government
suppose
public
if
sector.
you've got a long-standing botnet and you've set it doing something, to
Mhm.
stop it doing that means you've got to go and you yourself have to go and tell it to stop.
True.
And why
Yeah.
would you bother? Just
Yeah,
let
yeah.
it carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ubiquity is still in that top list
Yeah.
as well, which again makes sense given the sort of context around security issues that Ubiquity have had in the past 12 months. Nothing new under the sun about source IP reputation. 97% are on a known list somewhere. There's very, very little in the way of, oh, we've not heard of that IP in the past 7 days, and all of a sudden it's attacking things.
Yeah.
The lists, it's interesting to me that the sort of IP known bad lists, they're updated so quickly that I don't think we would ever really get a situation where it's not true that most of them are known attackers, at least within the time periods that we're
Yeah,
looking
because
at.
historically it was a real challenge around known bad IP lists. When back in the days when things had to be updated and checked manually, mostly the lists were so out of date that the stuff that was on there was no longer bad. And the bad stuff that was active wasn't on the lists. So it isn't surprising to me that there's been a lot of effort put in. And I am talking because, grayness and whatever. I am thinking back to 2010, 2012, when I was at that time trying to see what stuff we could augment our information with in order to make, could we make automated routes right at the beginning of that time when people were taking automation seriously? Well, could we automate just banning everything on this list? And every now and then we'll repopulate the list from wherever it's updated, and then we'll go through and write a bunch more automated firewall rules. We did test some of that stuff, and it was remarkably ineffective.
Spend a lot of time having to field calls from people who say, well, I've got somebody from totally legitimate business who can't access any of our web services.
Absolutely.
You spend more time doing that than actually getting...
No, it didn't work. But then I suppose the other way is if these lists are now being probably automated updates, I don't think there are people involved in this stuff anymore.
No, I mean, our CTI feed for IPDB is the tens of thousands of record updates every day, which is insane.
Which is very cool, but that does mean then that if you have got threat intel coming into your security visibility tooling, you can cross-reference these things in real time and be fairly confident that the analysts have got that stuff to hand, and that where it says this particular attack is associated with a known bad IP, that definitely requires triage.
Yeah, it's a better indicator than it's ever been, I think, in lots of ways, just because of how well updated these lists are. I've picked a sort of fairly random, but also because it's relatively modern, CVE signature out of the top 10, which wasn't there the week before, which is 2024 6387, which is the OpenSSH regression race condition. This is the one where a researcher was confused as to why it took slightly longer for his SSH session to connect than he was used to. And we're talking in the hundreds of milliseconds. And then he went poking and found this regression. It's to do with, as I say, it's a race condition that leads SSHD to handle signals in an unsafe manner sometimes. A remote attacker might be able to trigger it by failing to authenticate within a set period. The mitigations are well known. You don't even need to do a patch to mitigate against this. There's a login grace time option in SSHD config that you can simply set to 0 and everything goes away. But obviously, with all mitigations, you actually have to apply them. So as we say every week, make sure you patch, because I think the newer versions of SSHD come with that setting set to login time 0, as well as I think some mitigations in software. So make sure you...
that's quite an interesting one, because as you say, SSH it will remain a target for the foreseeable, probably see me out. So making sure that it's well secured is really important.
Absolutely. There's live exploit toolkits.
Does that one just remind me? Does that one allow you to bypass some of the PAM modules? Can you bypass MFA through that?
I believe so. Yes.
So that is really something to take seriously.
It can be, it could be particularly gnarly. And as I say, there's loads of toolkits out there for exploiting this. the sort of top of the list just comes off of GitHub. So you don't even have to go hard, don't have to go looking hard for these toolkits. To be fair, that one's 32-bit systems only, but there are still plenty of those.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's the thing. You see, we come across these things. Every day I'm reading probably more stuff in preparation for this briefing than one would want to. But I'm wading through a load of things. But by the time something has hit that what I would consider to be the mainstream cyber news, it's been well known for a long time.
Completely. I mean, Shiny Hunt is well known to be hammering this particular exploit all over the internet. It's very closely tied to them. A lot of the sort of bigger, wider attacks are trying to utilize this vulnerability. So it's in the top 10 for a good reason, basically. Slightly new and different piece of information this week. I've got highest unique IPs versus attack rate per honeypot, because obviously we run a lot of different honeypots. We've had 160,000 attacks in 7 days for roughly 100 unique IPs on the DICOM honeypot that we run.
That's interesting.
So DICOM, for those of you not in the know, because I certainly wasn't until I started down this path, but it's digital imaging and communication in medicine is what DICOM is. It's to do with sending around pictures of X-rays and stuff between health institutions and even internally. I think it's had a lot of problems, presumably in the past, because there's a lot of potential vulnerabilities, and there are a lot of systems that use DICOM under the hood, and there's things like PAX, which stands for he says something picture archiving and communication system, which apparently lots of hospitals use, and I think it's just sort of a software front end for the kind of DICOM system and transfer protocol. But yeah, it's used to standardise format and transmission for medical imaging and related data. So it's not just pictures of people's broken bones. There's also a lot of potentially identifiable data for individuals being bandied around that system, which I guess makes it a decent target. 160,000 attacks for 100 unique IPs. That's a high ratio.
That is a very high ratio. Yeah, that's quite. So somebody is very interested in that particular.
Absolutely, yeah. And because we're talking about individuals and medical records, it kind of strikes me that it's probably not for money necessarily that these attacks are being taken. There's potential, I think, quite high potential for nation-state sponsored activity in that area.
I think one of the things that a lot of people forget is that certain nation states, especially, just to name them, especially China, has got an approach of just hoover up everything and worry about whether it's useful later. It doesn't matter if it's data, if it's information. Hold on to it. It doesn't matter if it's encrypted, because you'll be able to decrypt it later, and some of the stuff will still be relevant or still have value at that point. So it's difficult always to understand why, let's say, why en masse collecting X-ray images would be useful, but it doesn't matter whether we understand whether it's useful. I don't think the people collecting it don't really know whether it's going to be useful or not. They haven't got a plan other than just collect as much of everything as you possibly can, because at some point we may think of a reason why we want that.
I mean, I think China particularly prescribes to the idea that data is oil, and the more of it you've got, the better.
Absolutely. Yes. That's in gold, seeing as they seem to have most of the world's gold these days.
Absolutely. So I just thought I'd pick that up because it was a relatively interesting and different thing to look at that I wasn't particularly familiar with. Our average unique IPs per day have dropped by about 2,000 over the past week, so we're sort of roughly 2,600 known unique IPs per day. That's sort of the maximum attacks per 100 unique IPs has been 3,913. So there are fewer IPs doing probably more attacks than there were this time last week, which again, I guess is just a shift in mechanism for running these scans. Really. If you, as a threat actor or a threat group, if you find an IP that nobody seems to be blocking, I guess you just funnel an awful lot of traffic through it until then
eventually it gets blocked and you're back to looking for the next one that works.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of it from me, really. There's an awful lot of attacks this week coming from Google ASNs. Google Cloud particularly, which is different to what we were seeing before. We were seeing sort of a lot of individual big business, but not necessarily cloud business ASNs previously. But Google Cloud Platform seems to be being utilized a lot.
Google is the place to be if you're in an adversarial group.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, and I'm sorry, I didn't do the research, but I should have done. It wouldn't surprise me to find that Google has got some sort of introductory offer running in their cloud services at the moment.
Yes, of course.
A certain number of free compute hours or something like that. It wouldn't surprise me to find out that that's why it's all of a sudden shot to the top of the list.
Yeah. Well, look, that's absolutely fascinating insight into what's going on. It's interesting to see what changes week on week. We'll carry on looking at this stuff, and as we're finding things that are interesting, we'll continue to bring them to the audience.
Absolutely.
And,
I think the next few weeks I'm going to target individual honeypots that we've got rather than giving a sort of broader image, because I think quite a lot of the more interesting insights are to do with individual honeypots that are being targeted rather than kind of big insights. So yeah, I'll have a look around.
Definitely. I look forward to discussing that with you. So cool. That's all for today. Hope you've had a good week so far. Hope you have a good Friday and a good weekend. All things being well, I'll be back on Monday, and Ross will be back with us again next Friday.
See you next Friday. Cheers, guys.